It was like the smell of a dead person. Warning, disturbing content, viewer discretion is advised. What is the most creepy/unnerving experience that's ever happened to you? Serious. My dad once kicked a play ball high up in the air and it never came down. We were in a parking lot of a high school and he said, "Hey boys. Watch this." And drop kicked a ball up in the air. It sailed straight up, and up, and up, getting smaller and smaller, and it literally never came down. It disappeared. We never played with it again. Waking up in the middle of the night to tornado sirens, then having the power go out before you can turn on the TV or computer to check the weather and see where it is. It was around 5 a.m. and a tornado had ripped through my town and did tons of damage. Luckily nobody died. When I was around 6, one of my friend's brother died, and when we visited the wake, I smelled something odd when I went closer to his coffin. It was like the smell of a dead person. Probably 2 weeks after, that friend and some of our other friends played in my house and all of a sudden I smelt that same smell. Then she, the friend, said, "I can smell my brother's coffin." I got shocked. Next thing I know, she and her other sister went to the corner of my house for like 2 minutes because to them, their brother was there. They talked in the corner like he was really there. 19 years later, I still get creeped out when I pass by that corner in the house. Long story short, we were driving a 25-year-old old car down a mountain road in a thunderstorm when we passed ourselves going in the opposite direction. The chances of someone having that exact model car with the same mismatched door are as close to zero as you can get. We couldn't immediately turn around because it was a winding mountain road in horrible weather conditions, but we did so as quickly as possible, then sped back up the mountain looking for the other car. We never found it, so I can only assume it was actually us from another timeline. I'll elaborate if you're curious. I was hanging out with some rather new acquaintances/friends of friends. One of them, I'll call him Bob, was being kinda pushy about wanting to have sex. Which I thought was odd because I'd literally just met him, but whatever, it was a rowdy group. We were in an apartment I shared with 3 roommates. One thing and another, and all the roommates and other people had gone somewhere, and it was just me and Bob left. I don't quite remember the context. I think I said something about my feet being sore. Bob picked me up like off the ground, over his shoulder, while I was telling him not to. Really freaked me out. I yelled very loud. No one was in my apartment, but it was a dense complex and I'm sure the neighbors probably heard. No one came, but I think the loudness startled him and he put me down and left. I never saw him again. I think he was just joking around and would probably not have raped me or anything, but it's seriously unnerving. I'm pretty short and small and he was a big guy, and it was such an icky, helpless feeling. I was about 13 and I had really bad paranoia. I would tell my parents and friends about it, but friends laughed at me and my parents thought I was just being a pussy. One day I was home alone, and whenever I was home alone I heard footsteps coming from downstairs. I knew it was in my head, so I tried to keep it in the back of my head. One day though, I heard footsteps walking around at the bottom of the stairs. My room is at the top of the stairs, so I knew that this time the footsteps were closer and there was only a flight of stairs between me and these footsteps. I slowly walk over to my window and open it just in case I have to jump out or something. I couldn't even lock the door because my parents kept my bedroom door key. It was at this point where all I heard was footsteps slowly making their way up the stairs and I started to shit myself. I'm standing on the outside window ledge ready to jump, and then I see my door handle start to turn. I noped out of there so fast. I fell from the second-story window and sprained my ankle, but still kept on running and then jumped over a fence. I call my dad and he says he will be home in half an hour, so I wait behind the fence until he comes home and scope the house out. A few years later, and seeing a therapist only to realize I have mild symptoms of schizophrenia. Loads of similar stuff have happened and now I finally have an understanding of why it's happening, but before I was diagnosed you best believe I was freaked out. My mom has been into heroin most of my life, and when I was 6 I was put into state custody. In my state there is a soft restraining order put onto parents when their children are taken from them. She used to wait outside my school, and when I would walk home she would follow me and try to talk to me from across the street through the neighborhood. I was always scared to talk to her because I thought she would get into trouble if I acknowledged her. She wanted me to get in her car and run to a different state with her. This went on for weeks. I was always scared and didn't know what to do. Still scarred to this day 20 years later. The wife and I were eating at a restaurant when two men came in and just sat by the entrance. One was wearing what looked like construction type clothes, and the other was dressed very dapper. We got up to leave, and as soon as we walked by, the nicely dressed man followed right behind and then just stood outside of the entrance to the restaurant. We got in my car and drove to the grocery store that was in the same parking lot. When we got out, that man was standing right in front of the entrance of the grocery store, and talking on the phone. At this point we were aware that something was up, so I told my wife to stay in the store while I grabbed the car. She said no, as she didn't want to be alone, so when we walked out we locked arms. The guy was gone, but when we approached my car, both the dapper man and the construction man had pulled their car a row behind mine, and both were standing halfway out with the doors open and car running, staring at us. I walked my wife to the passenger side, then stared at them as I walked around the back and pulled my shirt over my pistol so that they could see it. Conceal carry permit. They did, and immediately shut their doors and backed out. We called the police to tell them what had happened, and they sent out a unit to patrol the parking lot for a few days. It might seem like an overreaction to some, but at the time we lived in the sex trafficking capital of America. A few years ago I woke up in the middle of the night because of an explosion. It was so loud that you could feel the vibrations of it on the ground / on the walls in my room. My dad heard it as well, and we both, still in PJs, went outside to check what's going on. One of our neighbors did the same, and she didn't know what happened as well. The next day I told my mom, and she said she hasn't heard anything the night. We have a neighborhood group chat, and absolutely no one else had heard the explosion, and there was also no news about something like that. To this day my dad, our neighbor, and me are the only ones who heard it, and we still don't know what it was. When I was about 14 I was walking on the sidewalk when I passed an old man dressed in what looked like monk robes, although they didn't seem to belong to any religion that I knew, e.g. Buddhist / Taoist monks. As I passed him he suddenly tapped me and said, "Tell you the future?" I instinctively dismissed him and said no thanks, but right as I took a step to walk off he grabbed my forearm really hard and yanked me back and started getting agitated, shouting, "Big disaster coming for you." I'm not shaken by it anymore, and in all likelihood it may have been a crazy person, but I still recall the incident from time to time and get confused all over again. I've got plenty, but this one haunts me. One time when I was back from school in NY and staying at my mom's for the summer, I had taken the train home in broad daylight back to Mama's place. I was right in front of my house on a busy street most days, but today there was no one in sight, when a dinky two-door sedan pulls up right next to me. He gets out and tells me to get in his car. He says he's new in town and wants a tour. I said that I'm just going home and had prior engagements. He repeats the same "get in my car" line. He wasn't taking no for an answer. I started backing away, he took a step forward. I then sprint full speed into my neighbor's yard, whom I never talked to, vault over their brick wall, and hop into their yard. I peek and wait for him to leave. As soon as he goes I jump back over and run full speed into my house, and my mom is sitting there knitting. I say nothing except, "Can you help me pay for car insurance while I'm back in town for a while?" She says sure. I couldn't stop thinking about how that guy generally knows where I live for like the entire summer. Luckily my mom let me use her car for a while, so the amount I was outside between my mom's and the car was reduced. I was hiking in the PNW. Got water from a stream when someone starts throwing rocks. Not really at me, but over my head. A shot across the bow. I thought it was someone being a dick and yelled for them to stop. Next thing I know a huge rock comes flying out at me, almost hitting me. Must have been at least 200 pounds. I tried to pick it up, I was going to throw it back, and couldn't even budge it. I had spent that summer hauling 75 pounds bags of cement, so I wasn't any weakling. People always tell me it was an avalanche, but no way. Came from flat ground and the trajectory was all wrong. I hauled ass out of there. I'm schizophrenic, and the thing that was most creepy and unnerving was when I was smoking a cigarette outside at night and the neighbor's house started moving like it was breathing. Then I was suddenly enveloped with fear and couldn't find what was causing it, but it seemed as if something was there. When I was 14, I began experiencing what is known as head explosions. This is a strange condition in which people will hear a loud explosion-like sound while sleeping, causing them to shoot awake in a panic. To me, it sounds a lot like a loud object banging into the side of a shipping container. Well, The staircase in my house when I was 14 was directly adjacent to my room, on the far side, and at the bottom was a large dresser for shoes. The first night I experienced an explosion, I believed that one of my parents had fallen down the stairs and slammed into the dresser. I shot up and ran into the hall, staring into the darkness at nothing. I went upstairs and saw both my parents asleep. They slept with the door open, and I returned to bed. Sometime after I fell back asleep I heard the sound again. This time I ran out faster, saw nothing, but started calling out to my parents. They didn't respond, and I was actually too freaked out to go up the stairs. This continued 2 more times, and by the last one I had my head under the sheets because I truly believed my house was haunted. This happened periodically, and I just went on believing my house was haunted. I told my parents, told other people, and mostly it was met with skepticism or flat-out dismissal. As an adult, about 20 or so, I had my first explosion since out of that house. It was then that I began thinking there was just something wrong with me. A little research later and I discover a lot of people experience it. I was actually quite irritated, because I would continuously speak to my parents about what I was hearing, but they never even bothered to look into it themselves. At least the house wasn't actually haunted. When I was about 12 or 13, my best friend and I used to ride our bikes to a dollar store in a Closeby shopping center. I remember I was kneeling on the ground looking at the cheap makeup and this man just comes up and stands next to me, feet slightly spread apart, with his hands on his hips and crotch at my eye level. I look up and notice that he's wearing white football pants, of the transparent variety, and a red t-shirt. His shirt was tucked into his pants in the front so that you could clearly see every outline of his junk. I was confused and uncomfortable, so I just grabbed my friend and we left the store and rode our bikes home. Years later, being a true crime junkie, I realize now that this man was a pedophile and he likely went on to do worse things than this. I wish I would have told one of the employees when it happened. I'm very fortunate that this is the most disturbing thing I have ever experienced. I fell asleep on the sofa and my other half headed upstairs. I woke up to an eerie feeling, and I saw blurs of people, no shadows, nothing solid, around my head and felt really claustrophobic / struggled to breathe properly. I don't have a fear of small spaces. I asked my other half in the morning if he'd been down to check on me / go to the toilet in the night. Nope. He later admitted to having felt the house have an odd feel at times. Neither of us believes in that sort of thing, but there are times where we can't shake it. The playground shooting. I grew up in a shitty inner-city apartment complex, filled with your typical gang members and drug users. I was at the playground near the outskirts of the complex with my little brother and some of the neighborhood kids. I was the oldest, around 9 or so. My brother was about 5, and our 2 neighbors were about his age. I remember there was this loud shouting and I didn't know where it was coming from. Then I saw a man hauling ass toward the playground, cops right behind him. I grabbed the kids and shoved them inside the play area under the slide, a closed-in wooden space that was barely big enough to hold all of us. I pushed them all down and got on top of them, and that's when the shooting happened. The man was on one side of the playground, shooting at the officers, who were returning fire from the opposite side. I was screaming that there were kids inside, but no one could hear. It seemed like it lasted forever. The guy must have jumped the fence behind him because the shots stopped, and when we came out, no one was there. All of us kids went home immediately and told our parents. My mom was fucking furious. I don't know what happened, because I was obviously young, but I know she went down to the police department and raised hell. She moved us halfway across the country soon after that, and I don't blame her one bit. The summer I was 16 I worked at a movie theater, hated it for many reasons. To this day I can't eat movie theater popcorn. Anyway, it was my turn to take the garbage out, and the rule was that 2 people were supposed to go together, especially at night for safety reasons. Well, the supervisor on duty was not the nicest of people and had me go alone before I clocked out. The dumpster was in the back of the building and there were never a lot of people around. I went into the dumpster enclosure and this guy pops out and says something about how he wasn't there. I told him he needs to leave, that only employees were allowed in the area, and he kept coming towards me saying how he wasn't there. He had me keep backing up away from the entrance and I kept talking louder, almost shouting, when another employee came out asking what was taking so long. The guy ran off and I thanked her for coming out. My mom, who happened to work at a police station, picked me up and I told her what happened. She took me to her work and had me talk to an officer who asked me what he looked like. After I described him the best I could, it was dark and all I really remember to this day is his red hat. He had me look at a drawing and asked if he looked like the drawing. He did, and that's when I was told this person is a rapist they are trying to get. I was even more scared and my mom called my work. The evil supervisor got chewed out and the two-person rule was strongly endorsed. I was only there another month after this, thank goodness. Thank you for watching Reddit Space. Please subscribe if you love these Reddit stories.